Hello, everyone. My name is Evan Garrison, and I am a varsity IPDA debater at Mississippi State University. And this year, I have the great fortune of being your national student representative on the governing board. And over the past few years and during my tenure with the IPDA, I have become greatly concerned with the level of transparency that the governance of the IPDA currently has. And so this video and the ones that are sure to follow it are my attempts at making IPDA more democratic, transparent, and accessible to you, the members of the IPDA. So my goals in this video are quite simple. I'm just going to tell you what's been going on in IPDA governance and what you need to have on your radar, and hopefully give you some ways by which you can engage in the governance and actually have a say in what's going on. So to get started, it's probably important to lay out what IPDA governance actually looks like. The thing that you need to remember in order to understand most of IPDA governance and the happenings are that the executive committee, which consists of the president, executive secretary, and managing director, are the most formal authority, and they have pretty much all of the decision making and policy ability that exist in the league. There's also the governing board, which is what I sit on as the national student representative, which is an advisory board to the executive committee. So we can discuss policy and we can vote on it, but at the end of the day, all we're doing is making recommendations. We don't have the ability to actually implement things. All of this information and more, though, can be found in the IPDA Constitution, primarily in Section 2, Article 3, if you're curious. So with all that out of the way, in June, the IPDA Governing Board hosted their first meeting of the year. Now, it's important to establish how we even got to the point in time that we were having a meeting, so let me provide you with some of that background. Last year at Nationals, my lovely debate partner Ben Harvey, who I'm sure many of you know, and I presented roughly 15 years of public records and data on IPDA and did a variety of data analytics, demonstrating that we are possibly facing a stagnation crisis and making a case for proactive growth of the league. We believe that if the IPDA and their governance specifically is not to proactively pursue growth, then we're going to see this league inactivity that we love die out, and we don't want that to happen. So we were presenting these findings, and we were giving a good faith effort at presenting some policy recommendations that we felt were very achievable for the league. Now, this was met with varying feedback from a lot of the student members. We've heard positive feedback, though not exclusively, but seemingly from the governance of the league, there was a lot of pushback. A key quote that was actually sent via an email after the presentation from a member of the governing board was, quote, "I was in Evan and Ben's presentation. I also witnessed a horde of inaccurate information that bordered on actual lies." So just like right off the bat, we were doing our best. We were giving a good faith effort at presenting just data analytics and some simple policy proposals, and we're being told that we have inaccurate information and are presenting actual lies. And this is a trend that will plague and has plagued the IPDA governance, and you'll see that as we continue to go throughout this video and the ones to come, and that being this idea of you just don't have the information that you need, or you just don't understand how things work around here. I don't like that, and I don't think that is promoting the accessible form of debate that this league claims to do. And so what I'm doing, and what I'm hoping you guys are willing to partake in as well, is trying to challenge that. So with that in mind, I sent an email after becoming the student representative at Nationals last year. And eventually we decided that we would meet in June. But again, along the way, I was told, quote, "I will ask again that you wait until you have a better understanding of the current landscape before soliciting solutions." This is, again, the exact wording that was offered by a member of the governing board when being presented with a good faith effort in order to help the public image of the league and expand growth. Now, saying no to my proposal would have been fine if the reason for it was like supported with evidence or like an actual reason, not just you don't understand what's going on. You can give your opinion once you understand what's going on. If you're going to tell me that my proposal is bad or that there's a flaw or there's something I don't understand, I would really appreciate it if the information that I am supposedly lacking was also supplied. That was never done. So we met on June 10th. And we had a variety of agenda items. I submitted 5 proposals specifically. And there was also 4 other proposals that were submitted. So we're just going to go through those really quick so you can see what the IPDA governance is actually talking about and seemingly concerned by. So the first topic that was on the agenda was town hall meetings. Now, some of you may remember last December, there was the first ever IPDA town hall meeting with the intention of being a temperature check or a way that individuals could solicit opinions regarding the structuring of the league, the policy of the league, changes that they wanted to see within the league, anything like that. It was supposed to be a pretty typical town hall in that regard. And it wasn't as productive of a conversation as myself and a lot of people hoped that it would be. And so the executive committee, or the EC, gave this issue to the governing board, asking us for ideas or opinions on how we can bring these back, how we can keep these going, but ensure that they are more productive. Now, different members of the governing board had different opinions on this. Some people believe that these meetings should be used to present the quote-unquote nuts and bolts of the league and to provide general information, especially targeted at new teams or teams that are coming from other types of debate. Now, me personally, I was more on the train of keeping it policy focused as it has been historically, but the conversation that ended up happening was whether or not there would be capacity and ability and interest in having more than one type of town hall meeting. Some that are focused on individuals and teams who have been in the league for a while, so like my own Mississippi State, who are very interested in the policy conversations and suggesting changes about the league, and other ones that are targeted at new programs because that is important for proactive growth, that you're actually giving people information so that they can effectively engage in this league and know what's going on. Now, some governing board members expressed concern that we wouldn't have the capacity to do this and suggested that we serve who shows up. That's a direct quote. Now, my response to this, and also the response of other individuals of the governing board, was suggesting that we have targeted advertising and we host them on the same day, but almost divide and conquer. We're talking about like breakout rooms on a Zoom, different things like that, so that everyone can show up regardless of if they're experienced or not, and they can be served. So we're serving who shows up, but we're also making sure that no one shows up and ends up being bored. For example, if I was to show up and it was just general information about how to do IPDA, I might get a little bored because I've done this for a little while and it probably wouldn't be the most productive use of my time. Whereas if it was just exclusively focused on policy and rules and tensions that exist in the league, that could probably turn off some new programs. This is a pretty good middle ground. I actually like this idea a lot, but because of time in the meeting, we didn't end up voting on it, and as far as I know, no formal recommendation was made. Now, the next issue that we talked about was the 1 weekend, 1 tournament rule. This was the rule that was adopted so that novices and JVs could compete in TIPTA without burning their divisional eligibility. Before this rule was put into place, TIPTA counted as a separate tournament. So for individuals who have novice and JV eligibility left, instead of going to, for example, the Mississippi State tournament, and it counting as 1 tournament, if you did TIPTA, it would have counted as 2 tournaments against you. So it was pretty much preventing novices and JVs from competing in TIPTA. This rule was implemented so that we could, experiment, see if novices and JVs would compete, see if it would create competitive advantages for large programs, rich programs, small programs, whatever that looked like. But it was pretty unanimous in the governing board meeting that this is a great rule. If people want to debate, we should let them debate. And so a formal recommendation was offered on that to the executive committee to codify this rule. The next topic concerned the IPDA journal. For those of you who follow it so very closely, you may have noticed that no volumes of the journal have been published over the past 3 seasons. So the update that was briefly talked about in this meeting, but was primarily talked about in another meeting that occurred at a later time, is that work is currently underway to move the IPDA journal to a new host site so that it will have an actual impact factor and DOI for those of you who that matters to. For example, if you're tenure faculty and you need to make sure that you're having good citations on your CV, that's probably pretty important to you. So that's why it hasn't been getting published. It kind of got lost in the process along the way, but active work is being done on reviving the journal. The next topic was regarding comprehensive programs that do both IPDA and forensics competition, or in this case, the conversation also included teams who do IPDA and other types of debate. And so Abby Barnes, who is on the governing board, proposed hosting information sessions for new or transferring programs. There's generally a positive reception of this idea. It seemed to go a lot hand in hand with the previous town hall discussion, but this was more of a feeler idea than anything. Conversation on it was very brief. No formal recommendations were offered. Okay, so the last issue that was talked about before we get to my proposals was artificial intelligence, or AI. Yes, it is everywhere, and that includes IPDA and debate more generally. Now, the focus of this conversation was not about AI generally, but more so talking about whether or not IPDA governance should take a stance on AI. Now, what specifically does that look like? I immediately took a great pause to this and was concerned that this would look like implementing an AI outlaw ban. Now, my concern with this isn't necessarily based in my opinions on AI itself, but the enforceability of such a rule. The IPDA does not have good enforceability of rules in general. It is really hard to do rules challenges in the status quo, and so this ends up with a lot of people breaking the rules semi-regularly in some cases, and that's really frustrating. And so the issue with creating a prohibitive ban on AI, in my mind at least, is that you're going to end up punishing the do-gooders, the people who are trying to do the right thing, and giving an advantage to those who don't care and are willing to be bad actors. Now, the rest of the governing board didn't have any objection to that. They recognized that that was a legitimate concern, and so they clarified that the question is not whether or not we should make a rule regarding AI, but whether or not we should make a statement regarding AI. Something like, we as a board think that AI threatens debate, or we as a board think that AI is very good for debate, or whatever that ends up looking like. Now, the majority of the conversation was slated towards that former stance, that being that AI is bad for debate, with more tenured members of the board suggesting that it is killing the art of debate. Again, there was a lot of conversation around this and what the impacts of issuing a statement would be, and we talked about this rather extensively, and it was pretty divided down the middle, not just me versus everyone else on the board, or just a couple of outliers fighting for or against AI, but it was pretty divided down the middle on whether or not IPDA governance should actually take a official stance and issue a statement on this matter. And because of that, we spent a lot of time talking about it, but didn't end up voting on it, making a recommendation. And as far as I know, no further action is being taken on this item at this time. And I think this is a great issue for you guys to give your input on, which, again, just putting a pin in that, but we'll come back to that at the end of the video on how you can go about doing that. So with those issues discussed, we finally got to my proposals. Now, like I said earlier, I submitted 5 different proposals. Here's what they were. The first was forming a committee for action on the website and maintenance for it. The second was forming a committee for social media for action on it and maintenance as well. The third was an amendment to the IPDA Constitution to democratize student representation. We'll talk about the specifics of that here in just a moment. The fourth was a resolution or just an initiative to get the IPDA to release free, open source, high quality education materials. And then the final proposal was regarding transparency from IPDA governance, specifically in the form of regular communication requirements with the membership. At the point in time that we finally got to my proposals, there was only about 20 minutes left in the governing board meeting for the time that we had allotted, which is not really enough time to go through all these issues in depth. So it ended up just being an overview, largely focused on the website and on student representation. So the way I'm going to break this down is, because there is just kind of a general discussion in the governing board meeting as well. So we're going to talk about what the governing board's objection to forming committees is first, and then we're going to talk about the more specific issues like the website, social media, so on and so forth. So starting off with committees, the board broadly and generally, as far as I could tell in the meeting, unanimously opposed committees, with key quotes being as follows: quote, democracy is not efficient, end quote, involving more people increases the chance that something goes wrong. So why specifically are they concerned? Well, they're concerned about their personal capacity, the amount of accountability that would exist for these committees, and generally speaking, about delegating authority. They are worried that if it gets out of the authority gets out of the executive committee's hands, and they're all their ability to do literally everything for the league, then we'll see a deviation from the original form of IPDA. Now, I personally don't view the website or a social media presence as any way being a threat to the original form of IPDA. We're not changing the rules of the debate itself or any such things, but this is pretty indicative of the issues that have been plaguing the governance as a whole, that being that they are unwilling to delegate authority and that they really don't want to be democratic. My responses to those in the meeting, and that I will continue to articulate, is that standing committees create durable responsibility, not just more names. Now, what specifically do I mean by that? Well, when you have a standing committee, we get a couple different benefits. One, people know who's supposed to be doing something so they can hold them accountable. And secondly, many hands make light work. Delegating authority means that there's going to be better representation of the people in this league, the members of this league, but it also means that those carrying the workload will have a much smaller load on their particular plate, responding to the concern that is articulated time and time again from IPDA governance, that being, we don't have time to do with this. Here's the issue. They told me in response to this, this is more or less taken care of. We do have individuals that we trust outside of the EC and governing board who are actively working on this. But here's the distinction. An informal fix is not the same as a durable structure. If you have a volunteer who is unnamed, uncredited, then if that individual was to become occupied with other things that prevent them from serving in the role they are currently, there's no one to replace them because there's no role to be replaced. That's a problem. We need to make sure that we have durable, robust governance structures. But secondly, alongside that, if this individual is seeking, say, a promotion in their career or their tenure track, or participating in public service in some way matters to them in a great degree, like in a professional capacity, then it's really important that they can put on their resume or CV, hey, look, I'm a part of this committee. I'm helping work on this issue. And currently, they're not able to do that. They're literally just doing this out of the goodness of their heart with no return on their investment. If people are willing to give their time for the IPDA, we should reward them for doing so, not just give them a pat on the back and expect them to be there at the end of the day for us. All of that is to say, committees are a necessary, robust, durable structure for the IPDA to ensure that we have accountability, delegation of power, and are giving credit to people where credit is due. Now, with that out of the way, let's talk about the specific issues that this applies to, starting with the website. My proposal on the website was not just about implementing a modern one, which is coming. I'll talk about that in a few seconds, but was also about making sure that we had a committee in place to continually do maintenance on the website. My fear is that if we implement a new website this year, in 5 years, it's outdated again. We need to have people who are actively working on this in an official capacity so that we can make sure our public image stays positive. So here are the current updates on the website that I have and what the governing board is saying about them. None of this information came from the governing board meeting. I wasn't given any of this. I had to go seek out Hannah Morris, the coach of University of Arkansas, who won Coach of the Year last year. She's great, who is working on the website to get this information because they refused to give it to me during the governing board meeting. So here's what I know. Last Friday, which as of recording would be July 24th, a group of 7 individuals, including Hannah Morris and various individuals who involved in the governance of the IPDA, met regarding the new website. Now, the reason why a new website hadn't gone up yet isn't because one isn't made. Hannah Morris had made one. It was because the governance didn't realize that it was completely done. They thought it was a work in progress. And as a result, the free trial period on the website creation software had lapsed. So it reached the point in time that the governance would have to actually pay for it. They had this meeting last Friday, July 24th, in order to discuss the website. Now, a few key things that came out of it. An unofficial but tentative date that I was given, being told that the new website would be released, is August 1st. Now, as of recording this is tomorrow, so I may have to re-record this section. So tentative timeline, though, of getting the website out by August 1st. The individuals in this meeting were discussing a few different things, though. One, they are introducing a communication director to the IPDA. Now, when I first heard this, I was very excited. I thought this was a good way to get efforts and rolling on social media, a modern website, public image as a whole. But what I didn't realize was at the same time, the information I've gotten on this is a little dubious, so I could be wrong, but again, haven't been provided information. Seems to suggest that the webmaster title that we have currently is being gotten rid of. So this isn't actually a new position. It's just renaming the webmaster and also giving them more responsibilities. They were talking about this role in that meeting, though, and the individual who's going to be taking it. Then they were talking about the website. I haven't heard any developments on the website, specifically whether or not it's actually getting launched tomorrow, other such things. Hannah also asked whether or not committees would be formed for the new website and also for social media, seeing as there are individuals kind of already working on this, such as Hannah herself. She's not any official governance capacity for the IPDA. She's just doing this out of the goodness of her heart, and we're very, very grateful to her for it. But she wanted to know if she was going to be getting any help, any compensation, aka being able to say that she's on a committee at the national level for the IPDA, different things like that. And she was told no. So committees still are not occurring. That's not something that is in the books or is coming down the pipeline. So my proposal in that regard still matters. Now, we didn't really talk about my social media proposal all that much in the governing board meeting because most of the conversation focused around the website, but it's a lot of the same ideas, right? Making sure that we have a good public image. They have not taken any action on social media, and that's a problem. That's how we're going to reach people. That's a great way for us to make sure we're doing proactive growth measures in this league. Now, the next big issue that we talked about of my proposals was democratizing student representation, and this is one that I really super care about. I super care about the website, but I am really excited about the possibilities that exist with democratizing student representation in the IPDA. So what do I even mean by that? Well, the current model for student representation in the IPDA is that if you are the highest finisher in season-long rankings the prior year who is willing to serve as the varsity student representative, then you get the position. AKA, it's not based off of whether or not you're actually qualified to be a representative. It's not based off of whether or not you have made good promises or are dedicated to, making change in the league or doing your job or anything like that. It's literally just whether or not you're a good debater, which frankly is not a great metric for whether or not someone is going to be a good representative. We should have a say as students in who's representing us, and it shouldn't just be some individual sitting up in an ivory tower totally isolated from us with no accountability. Referring to myself at present, I suppose. I'm trying to be accessible though, guys, I promise. So the goal of this proposal was to find a way that we could create more direct student voice, accountability, and also allow for regional and divisional representation. So the way I presented this was as an amendment to the IPDA Constitution and bylaws that would make it so that instead of having one student representative who earns their position through competitive success, we would have 3 student representatives who are voted on by ballot by the students in the IPDA, presumably by a virtual ballot the week of nationals, the way that Coach of the Year and the elected members of the governing board are currently done. Now, I was presented with a variety of challenges and concerns to this. The first concern that was presented, though, the immediate reaction was, we don't trust 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds, young individuals who tend to be rash in their decision making and don't really know the IPDA like we do. Again, not quoting, but referencing individuals who have been serving on the governing board for a while. And we don't really care about their input insofar as to give them such a large voice in this organization. Now, I'll give credit where credit is due. They were not outwardly opposed. They were not opposed actually at all to having some form of voting for student representation. Their concern was mostly in having 3 student representatives. A couple of options from this, though. They presented me with 2 ideas of their own in response to my proposal that they thought would be workable. The first was having 3 student representatives who are elected, like I proposed, on the governing board, but they would be non-voting members of the governing board. Now, here's my concern with this. This isn't progress towards having more student representation in the IPDA. This would actually be quite a big regression in that, or like step back in that regard, seeing as we currently have at least 1 student who can vote, 1 student whose voice matters, and this would make it literally 0. That's a problem. It's not a solution. That doesn't increase student representation. If you wanted to host student listening sessions, which is something I'm going to talk about in a little bit, then you should go ahead and do that. The second response that I got was, well, why not just make it 1 democratically elected student representative? Here's my concern about that, being entirely honest. I am concerned that if we were to do that, then what's going to end up happening is that the largest programs from the largest regions, aka the Southeast, are going to be who ends up dominating the student representative position every year. And I think that's not particularly good for a time where we're trying to expand the geographical reach of the IPDA. And in my opinion, when we should be pursuing growth of the league as a whole. The way that we make this happen is by creating avenues by which students from across the country, not just in the Southeast and not just from large programs, can have a say in this organization. Having 3 different positions creates an opportunity and pretty good incentive to do this because it incentivizes regional individuals, regional actors, schools to come together to ensure that they have at least 1 representative rather than dividing the students such that we only see the biggest programs win. In my mind, having 3, minimum 3, democratically elected student representatives is key to the success of this proposal and the effectiveness of this proposal. But those are just my opinions. I was literally criticizing student representatives earlier for just sitting in an ivory tower. So I want to hear your opinion on this as well. Again, I'll get to how specifically you can do that in a little bit. So those were the proposals of mine that we got to. So we didn't get to talk about the Educational Resources Committee, which would be providing materials for students, coaches, judges, tournament directors, new programs, etc., to make sure that this activity is accessible to them, that they can actually learn how to do this and have a competitive chance, have a chance to be competitively successful in this league. We didn't get to that. I have a feeling that one will probably actually have more support than a lot of my other proposals, especially given the conversation that happened regarding the town halls and also Abby Barnes' proposal regarding comprehensive programs. So maybe there's hope for that particular one. And the other one was regular governance communication. I have literally no idea whether or not that one will be supported. I'm doing this at the very least, so hopefully this is a great way for you guys to find out about what the governance is doing. And there's more regular communication than you've had before, and I'm going to do my best to be as transparent and honest with you guys as possible about what is going on. But That is the happenings of IPDA governance since nationals of last year. It's been a few months, so there's a lot there. So this video has a lot of content. Hopefully it was helpful to you. But here are the things that I want to leave you with that I think are going to be very helpful to you. First of all, I keep coming back and telling you that I'm going to create ways for you to engage in the representation, engage and be represented in the governance of this league. And I keep referencing that I have a way for you to do that. I actually have a couple ways for you to do that. The first is I have created an email specifically for you to reach out to me with your ideas on. And also if you want more information or resources. So maybe you're a student-run team who needs some more resources. You need some pointers on how to get this team going, maybe how to identify a coach, drills, competitive resources, anything like that. This is a resource for you. This is where you should reach out. Maybe you have some ideas regarding policy and governance of the IPDA. You've done this for a while and there's some changes that you want to see take place. I want you to send those to me as well. I want to be able to make sure that your ideas, not just mine, not just my teams, but your ideas, all of the student members of this league, and also all the members of this league in general, coaches, you can feel free to email me as well, are represented. That it isn't just Evan and Evan's team's opinions or the insider club of IPDA governance opinions. So that email is student.rep.evan@gmail.com. An easy way for you to get access to this resource, this connection to me, and a variety of other resources that I will be posting, and also, and in my opinion, most importantly, a way for you to get access to opinion polls that I will be creating related to issues in these videos. So the opinion poll I have on there right now is in regards to AI, student governance, and I think that's it, is a link tree. So you're going to type in the normal link tree URL, but then the back part of that URL that matters is going to be /student.rep.evan. Now on that link tree, like I said, you'll find opinion polls, resources, and other such things. My email is also linked on there. So if you didn't catch it earlier, just go to the link tree. It's there. Again, it's linktree /student.rep.evan. And a new, very exciting announcement for all of you students is a student Discord. It's an unofficial IPDA student Discord that is student run, no coaches allowed. We have moderators though, and other rules that you will be required to follow. Just to make sure everyone stays safe and that we're being kind to each other in there. But it is also linked at that link tree. We would love to have you join it. We would love to see you in there and get some conversations going, movie nights planned, game nights planned, just general discussions going, whatever that looks like. And that's all of the announcements I have for you. So hopefully this video is helpful to you, and hopefully it tells you what's going on in IPDA governance, gives you a little bit of a peek behind the curtains, and gives you some resources by which you can engage in it. Again, my name is Evan Garrison. I'm your student representative this year, and I look forward to hearing from you guys.